I want to think carefully about luck and specifically about the role that luck actually plays in the building of wealth, because I think the way most people understand this relationship is not merely wrong, but wrong in a way that quietly determines their entire economic trajectory. When people look at someone who has built genuine wealth, the explanation they reach for almost automatically is luck. He was lucky. She was in the right place at the right time. They caught a wave that no one could have predicted. And I understand the appeal of this explanation, and I want to be careful about it because it is not entirely wrong. Luck is real, and it plays a genuine role. And anyone who tells you that luck plays no part in any individual outcome is not being honest with you. But the explanation of luck taken as the whole story, as the fundamental reason that some people build wealth and others do not, is one of the most comforting and most damaging misunderstandings a person can hold. And I want to spend some time taking it apart carefully because dismantling it is the necessary first step toward everything else. Let me be precise about the two extremes here because this is a subject where people reach immediately for one of them and both are false. The first extreme is the fantasy sold by a certain kind of motivational culture. The idea that anyone can become wealthy quickly and easily through the right mindset and the right attitude, that wealth is simply a matter of believing in yourself and following a few simple steps. This is nonsense, and it is destructive nonsense, and it has separated a great many people from their time and their money in pursuit of a shortcut that does not exist. And the second extreme is the opposite fatalism, the belief that wealth is entirely a matter of luck or birth or circumstance, that the game is rigged, that the people who have it simply got fortunate or were born into it, and that there is no learnable path, no system, nothing an ordinary person can actually do to change their position. This is also false, and it is false in a way that is more quietly damaging, because it removes the responsibility to act and provides a comfortable explanation for inaction. If it is all luck, then there is nothing to learn, nothing to build, nothing to be done except wait and hope. And the person who believes this is relieved of the difficult work of actually constructing the thing that produces wealth. The truth sits between these extremes, and it is more interesting and more useful than either of them, and it is this. Getting wealthy is not a matter of luck. It is a matter of a system, a learnable set of principles that applied consistently over a long enough period produces wealth with a high probability, even though the exact path and the exact timing are genuinely unpredictable. This is the crucial distinction, and I want to state it as clearly as I can. Luck determines the specific. It determines which particular opportunity arrives and when and in what form, but the system determines the distribution. It determines whether you are the kind of person who is positioned to recognize and capture an opportunity when it arrives, or the kind of person for whom opportunities arrive and pass unrecognized and uncaptured. The person who has built the system, who has armed themselves with the right principles and applied them patiently, has arranged their life so that when luck arrives, and over a long enough horizon, it always eventually arrives in some form, they are positioned to convert it into something durable. And the person who has not built the system watches the same luck arrive and pass because they were not positioned to capture it, and then concludes, watching the person who did capture it, that the difference between them was luck, when the actual difference was the system that determined who could use the luck when it came. So the question that actually matters, the question that this whole reflection is about, is not how to get lucky, because you cannot control luck. The question is how to build a system, how to arrange your life and your work and your knowledge and your position so that you are the kind of person who converts the inevitable arrival of opportunity into genuine and durable wealth. And this system, which is learnable, which can be understood and applied by anyone willing to do the difficult work of understanding and applying it, is a thing that is almost never taught, not because it is secret, but for reasons I will come to, and it is the thing I want to lay out carefully. Let me begin with the most foundational principle of the entire system, the one that everything else depends on, and it is a distinction so basic that its very simplicity causes people to overlook it. You must seek wealth and you must understand clearly what wealth actually is, as distinct from the two things that are constantly confused with it, which are money and status. These three things, wealth and money and status, are used almost interchangeably in ordinary conversation, and the confusion between them is the first and most consequential error a person can make. Wealth is assets that earn while you sleep. It is the businesses and the ownership stakes and the productive things that generate value, whether or not you are personally present and personally working. Money is simply how we transfer wealth, how we move claims on time and value from one person to another. It is a tool, a unit of account, not the thing itself. And status is your position in a hierarchy, your rank relative to others. These are three entirely different things, and the person who pursues them as though they were the same makes predictable errors. The pursuit of status in particular is worth examining because it is one of the great traps, and it is a trap precisely because it feels so much like the pursuit of wealth while being its near opposite in structure. Status is a zero-sum game. For you to rise in a hierarchy, someone else must fall, and this means that the pursuit of status is fundamentally a pursuit that creates enemies, that sets you against others, that requires you to defeat rather than to build. Wealth, by contrast, is a positive-sum game. You build wealth by creating genuine value for others, by producing something that people want, and when you do this well, everyone involved is better off. The person who receives the value and the person who created it. The distinction matters enormously because the person who is playing a status game, who is oriented toward rank and position and the defeat of rivals, is engaged in an activity that is structurally different from and often opposed to the activity that actually builds wealth. And yet the two feel similar from the inside. And a great many people spend their energy on the status game while believing they are pursuing wealth and end up with neither. These foundational principles, the true nature of wealth as against money and status, and the positive sum logic of genuine wealth creation, are worth studying deliberately and as a connected system rather than as scattered pieces of advice. And there is a body of work that lays them out carefully called the Naval Codex. It is not a set of tactics and it is not a scheme. It is a systematic account of the underlying principles that determine who builds genuine long-term wealth and who merely earns and consumes and competes for status. If you want to engage with those principles directly, the framework is linked in the description below, and there is a code on the screen you can scan to reach it. And engaging with the principles directly is what matters most, because the principles are what hold across every particular situation, and the particular situations will always be different for every person. Now, having established what wealth actually is, the next principle of the system follows directly, and I will state it briefly because it is the foundation that everything else builds on, which is that you will not get rich by renting out your time. I have thought about this at great length, and the structure of it is simple and inescapable. Renting your time is linear, it does not compound, and it does not build ownership, and wealth requires all three of the things that renting time lacks. You get wealthy by owning a piece of something that grows, by holding equity in a business or an asset that compounds and that produces value while you sleep. This is the mechanism, and there is no other mechanism. And everything else in the system is in service of getting you into a position of genuine ownership rather than perpetual rental of your finite hours. I have explored the full structure of why this is so elsewhere, but for the purposes of the system, the point is simply that ownership is the destination, and the rest of the principles are the vehicle that carries you there. So let me turn to the heart of the system, the actual engine of wealth creation, which comes down to three things that must be developed and combined. And these three things are specific knowledge, accountability, and leverage. If you understand these three and you develop them and you combine them and you apply them over a long enough horizon, you will, with a probability that is far higher than the myth of luck admits, arrive at genuine wealth. Let me take each of them carefully, because each is frequently misunderstood, and it is in the combination of all three that the real power lies. The first is specific knowledge, and specific knowledge is a particular thing. not simply expertise or credentials or general education. Specific knowledge is the knowledge that cannot be trained. It is the knowledge that, if it could be taught through a standard course or a manual, would already have been taught to many people who would then be doing the work for less, competing its value away to nothing. Specific knowledge is highly technical or genuinely creative. It sits at the edge of what is understood, and it cannot be acquired through formal instruction because it is not yet codified into instruction. It is found instead by pursuing your genuine curiosity and your genuine passion, by following the things that fascinate you so deeply that you cannot help but pursue them, because that pursuit, driven by real curiosity, takes you to the edges where the codified knowledge runs out and the specific knowledge begins. And this is why it feels like play to you and looks like work to others. The person with genuine specific knowledge acquired it by following an obsession that others found tedious or incomprehensible. And the gap between what feels like play to you and what looks like work to everyone else is precisely the signature of specific knowledge. And it is the reason it is so difficult to compete away, because you cannot pay someone to have your particular obsessions, and you cannot train someone into the knowledge that only genuine curiosity produces. The second is accountability. And this is the principle that most people instinctively avoid. And their avoidance of it is precisely why they remain on the wrong side of the wealth equation. To take on accountability is to attach your name to what you do, to accept the genuine risk of being wrong in public, to take responsibility for outcomes under your own name, with your own reputation at stake. The market rewards accountability, and it rewards it enormously, and it rewards it precisely because most people flee from it. When you accept accountability, when you put your name and your reputation and your judgment on the line, you become someone who can be given the leverage and the equity that produce wealth, because you have made yourself someone who bears the consequences of the decisions. The person who hides in the anonymity of a large organization, who is one of many, whose name is on nothing, who bears no personal risk for the outcomes, has traded away, in exchange for that safety, their claim on the rewards. Accountability is risky, and the risk is exactly why it is rewarded. And the willingness to take it, to build under your own name and accept the downside as well as the upside, is one of the great dividing lines between those who build wealth and those who do not. And the third input, the one that multiplies the other two, is leverage. Specific knowledge and accountability on their own still limit you to what your own effort can produce. Leverage is the force that breaks that limit, that allows your output to become disconnected from and vastly larger than your personal labor. And there are, as I have thought about it, three forms of leverage, and understanding the difference between them is understanding a great deal about why the current moment is one of extraordinary opportunity. The oldest form is labor, other people working under your direction, and it is powerful but difficult, and it requires permission, the willingness of those people to follow you. The second form is capital, money working on your behalf. And it is powerful and it compounds beautifully, but it too requires permission, and it generally requires that you already have capital or the credibility to be entrusted with it, which is why it has historically favored those who already have wealth. And then there is the third form, the new form, the one that has genuinely changed everything, which is leverage from products that have no marginal cost of replication, which is to say code and media. A piece of software, a piece of writing, a piece of recorded thought can be replicated infinitely at no additional cost, and each copy works for you without any further labor, and reaching 1 million people costs you no more than reaching one. This is leverage that requires no permission from anyone. You do not need to be given capital, and you do not need people to agree to follow you. You need only to build something genuinely useful once, and then the replication is free and permissionless. This is the great democratization of leverage. And it is the single most important reason that the myth of luck is weaker now than it has ever been, because the most powerful form of leverage in history is now available without permission to anyone with the specific knowledge to build something worth replicating. Now I want to widen the lens. because there's a larger structure within which this entire system operates, and understanding it makes the urgency of building the system clear in a way that the principles alone do not. We live within a debt-based monetary system in which the supply of money expands over time, and this expansion flows first into assets, bidding up the prices of the things that owners own, while wages and cash savings lag behind and quietly erode. What this means is that building wealth is not merely an opportunity, a nice thing to do if you can manage it. It is, in a sense, a requirement simply to avoid going backwards, because the person who holds only wages and cash is being continuously diluted, their purchasing power flowing away year after year toward those who hold assets. The system I am describing, the path to genuine ownership through specific knowledge and accountability and leverage, is not merely the path to getting ahead. It is increasingly the path to not falling behind, because the monetary reality quietly punishes those who remain on the side of wages and cash, and quietly rewards those who cross over to the side of ownership. The way capital actually moves during these monetary dynamics, where it flows and why, and what happens to different kinds of assets when the monetary order itself begins to shift, is worth understanding in its specific mechanics rather than in vague outline. And there is a framework that traces exactly this, called the dragon pivot. Despite the name, it is not really about any single country. It is about how monetary transitions unfold across history, what they do to different asset positions, and how those who understood them early positioned their wealth to be carried along by the shift rather than diluted by it. The code shown on the screen leads straight to it, as does the link in the description, for anyone who wants the fuller historical picture. And the fuller picture matters here because understanding the monetary reality is what turns the abstract advice to build wealth into a concrete understanding of why remaining where you are is not actually a safe or neutral choice. This brings me to the question of what exactly you should be building and owning, because the system produces an output, and that output is ownership of assets, and not all assets are equal, and the distinction between them matters greatly. There is a crucial difference between assets whose value is grounded in genuine productive capability, in the creation of real value for real people, and assets whose value is merely a claim on a strained system or a bet on a rising price with nothing real beneath it. The system I have described, applied well, produces the former. It produces equity in enterprises that create genuine value, intellectual property that generates real returns from real usefulness, ownership of things whose worth is grounded in the real productive activity they represent. And these are the assets worth building toward, because their value is durable, grounded in something real, resistant to the monetary and technological disruptions that erode purely financial claims. The person who applies the system and directs its output into genuine productive assets is building something that lasts. The person who applies effort and directs it into speculation, into the appearance of wealth, into paper claims disconnected from real production, is building something far more fragile, something that resembles wealth in favorable conditions and reveals itself as something else when conditions turn. The work of distinguishing genuinely productive assets from merely financially engineered ones, and of building a position out of real productive capability rather than out of speculation or paper claims, is worth doing systematically, and there is a framework devoted precisely to that, called the Sovereign Vault. It is concerned with building durable, generationally significant wealth grounded in things that produce genuine value in the world, rather than in the financial engineering that looks like wealth in good conditions and dissolves in bad ones. You will find it linked below, and the code on the screen will take you to it directly if this is the part you want to go deeper on. And going deeper here is worthwhile, because the entire point of building the system is to end with genuine and durable ownership. And the durability depends entirely on owning the right kind of thing. Now I want to turn to the dimension of time, because it is the dimension that the myth of luck most completely obscures, and it is the dimension in which the entire system either succeeds or fails. Everything I have described, the specific knowledge and the accountability and the leverage and the ownership operates through compounding. And compounding requires time, long stretches of it, and long stretches of a particular kind of behavior, which is the playing of long-term games with long-term people. The person who builds wealth through this system does so by playing iterated games, by building reputation and relationships and knowledge that compound over years and decades, by working with the same trustworthy people again and again in a way that allows trust and knowledge and opportunity to accumulate. And compounding in wealth, as in everything else, produces almost nothing visible in its early period. The curve is nearly flat at the beginning. The specific knowledge is being built but has not yet become valuable. The reputation is being established but has not yet begun to generate opportunity. The ownership is being accumulated but is still small. All of the visible reward, all of the steepness of the curve arrives later, after the base has grown enough that the returns begin to generate returns and the growth turns nonlinear. And this is precisely why, from the outside, the successful application of the system looks like luck. Because the observer sees only the visible part. The moment when the compounding has finally become steep enough to be undeniable, and they do not see the long, flat years of patient building that preceded it, the years of accumulating specific knowledge and reputation and ownership that produced nothing visible and that constituted the actual work. And so, seeing only the sudden visible success and none of the invisible foundation, they conclude that the success was luck, a windfall, a fortunate break, when in fact, it was the entirely predictable, entirely deterministic result of a system applied patiently over a long enough horizon for the compounding to complete. The luck they perceive is the luck the system manufactured, the opportunity that the patient builder was positioned to capture because they had spent the flat years building the position from which capture was possible. The arrival of genuinely capable artificial intelligence sharpens all of this, and it sharpens it in a way that makes the system more powerful and the myth of luck even weaker. Because artificial intelligence amplifies precisely the inputs of the system, the specific knowledge and the leverage, multiplying the output of the person who has built genuine depth and who can direct these new tools with the precision that only real understanding allows. And it does very little for the person who has no specific knowledge to amplify and no capacity for the sustained focus that building requires. And so the gap between the person who has built the system and the person who has not, which was already wide, is about to widen dramatically. And the excuse of luck, already weak, is about to become weaker still because the most powerful tools for applying the system are becoming available to anyone. And the difference in outcomes will increasingly be a difference not of luck, but of who built the specific knowledge and the ownership that the tools amplify. So I want to turn to the question of why, if all of this is true, if getting wealthy is a learnable system rather than a matter of luck, this system is so rarely taught, why it is, as the framing goes, the system they never teach you. And the answer is not a conspiracy. And I want to be clear about that, because the conspiratorial explanation is both false and disempowering. The answer is structural. The institutions that prepare people for economic life, the schools and the training systems and the conventional career paths, exist primarily to produce workers, to produce the reliable, competent, organized labor that the economy needs in enormous quantity. And the principles of ownership, of building equity, of acquiring specific knowledge through curiosity and combining it with accountability and leverage are not the principles that produce good workers. They are the principles that produce owners. And the institutions are not designed to produce owners. They are designed to produce labor. And so they teach the things that make good labor. And they do not teach the things that make owners, not because anyone is hiding the truth, but because the machinery is optimized for a different output. The system they never teach you is not withheld out of malice. It is simply not the thing the teaching machinery was built to produce. And there is a deeper reason beneath the structural one that the system is not applied even by the many people who could learn it, and It is the same reason that recurs whenever I think carefully about why people fail to do the things that would build wealth. The reason is that applying the system requires enduring exactly the things that human beings are least equipped to endure. It requires taking on accountability, accepting genuine risk under your own name, when the safe and comfortable path is to hide in the anonymity of employment. It requires resisting the pull of the status game, declining to spend your energy on rank and position, when the desire for status is one of the deepest human drives. It requires pursuing genuine curiosity into the specific knowledge that only obsession produces, when the easier path is to acquire the general, trainable knowledge that everyone has. And above all, it requires enduring the long, flat years of compounding, building patiently through the period when nothing is visible, resisting the temptation to abandon the process during the extended early stretch when the returns are small and the effort is large and there is no external validation to sustain you. The comfort of the luck explanation is precisely that. It relieves a person of all of this difficulty. If it is all luck, then there is no accountability to take, no status game to resist, no specific knowledge to painfully acquire, no flat years to endure. There is only waiting and hoping is easy, and the difficult work of building the system is hard, and the myth of luck exists in part because it excuses a person from the hard thing by attributing the outcome to a force outside their control. So I want to end, as I always do, not with an exhortation, but with an invitation to see the structure clearly, because this is, in the end, one of the oldest pieces of wisdom there is, understood by every serious tradition that ever took seriously the question of how a person builds something lasting. Wealth is not, at the level of the system, a matter of luck. It is the predictable result of the patient application of a learnable set of principles, the acquisition of specific knowledge through genuine curiosity, the acceptance of accountability under your own name, the deployment of leverage, especially the new permissionless leverage that is now available to anyone, the accumulation of genuine ownership of productive assets, and the willingness to play long-term games and to endure the long, flat years until the compounding completes. This is not new. It is the oldest structure of wealth creation, and it has always worked, and it works still. What is new is only the circumstance, the arrival of permissionless leverage and powerful new tools that make the system more accessible to the ordinary person than it has ever been in the whole of history, and that make the excuse of luck weaker than it has ever been. I am not telling you that this is easy, because it is not easy. It is difficult, and the difficulty is real, and it is the difficulty of taking accountability, of resisting status, of acquiring genuine specific knowledge, of enduring the flat years without validation. But it is difficult in the way that a learnable skill is difficult, not impossible, in the way that catching luck is impossible. The distinction is everything. A skill, however difficult, can be learned and practiced and applied, and its application over a long enough horizon produces a predictable result. And so the invitation is simply to stop waiting for luck and to start building the system quietly and patiently, and on whatever scale your circumstances allow, to acquire the specific knowledge that your genuine curiosity draws you toward, to take on the accountability that most people flee, to reach for the leverage that is now available without permission, to accumulate ownership of things that produce genuine value, and to play the long-term game with the patience that the long-term requires. None of this is done in a single act, and none of it produces a sudden windfall. It is done slowly, in the accumulation of many small choices to build rather than to wait, to own rather than to rent, to endure the flat years rather than to abandon them. And the result, invisible for so long, arrives. When it finally arrives, the way these things always do, slowly, and then suddenly, at the moment when the compounding you have been building all along finally becomes visible, and the people who watched only the visible moment and never saw the years of patient building beneath it call it luck, while you understand that it was, from the beginning, a system